What's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another Hobby Pants. We are excited to be working on a new project tonight. For those of you guys who have been tracking along, we have been working on an Age of Sigmar Gargant for Battle to End Alzheimer's. That is an event going on next month to benefit, of course, the Alzheimer's Association. It's a great charity. Definitely something you guys want to check out if you haven't heard about it. But we've got that guy finished. He is varnished up. He has been based. He's ready to go into the mail. So here you have the finished Frost Gargant. A lot of fun, but a lot of time. All in all, somewhere in the ballpark around 40, 42 hours. Time well spent, if you ask me. I got to really push myself, try out other techniques. A couple of big things about it were really big wins. The leather, for example, absolutely loved the way the leather turned out. The mace right there, the rock on that mace has got a really nice granite vibe to it. We did come back in and pop some shadows up underneath, nice and subtle there, but that blends with the rest of everything else. That was a filter application we did this morning to wrap it all up. So either way, this guy is getting put into the mailbox likely Monday, and glad to be moving on from him. So again, thank you to JC for giving me the opportunity to take part in such a wonderful charity event. Let's have him watch over me in the background here. How about that? What's going on, Proto J? Great to see you, man. Great to see you. Yeah, happy to have that one done for sure. Tonight we're going to kick it off with Magneto, starting our Marvel Crisis Protocol journey up here at Counterspell Games. We've got Cryface has done a couple of these videos so far. He's worked on Captain America. You see a Captain America right here. Let's slide all the way up in here. So he worked on this Captain America. If you guys don't know, Cryface is the showcase painter out of Hobby Goblin Studios. Does a really nice job, and this guy's almost done. He also got some work on a Red Skull I don't have within arm's reach. Didn't get quite the same amount of progress done there. But yeah, we got to get these guys painted up. And what better way to do it than hanging out with you guys. If this is your first time tuning into the channel, thank you so much for tuning into it. If you like the content, be sure to hit that like button. And of course, hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on any further art content. If your vibe is tabletop gaming and you're a 40K person, of course, definitely check out the Hobby Goblins YouTube, where we put forth our cave reps. We call them, those are our battle reports, specifically for 40K, where we highlight competitive play with a friendly twist, right? The game we're playing with our opponent, so we try not to get too sweaty. We instead try to work together to make a good game out of it. But that's enough waxing right there. Let's just give a quick shout out to our sponsors, of course, Artis Opus. You're going to see plenty of those guys this evening. Between their round brushes and their dry brushes, they make a great product. Of course, we're going to be using a lot of too thin coats. I've already started pulling aside some colors that I'll be looking to use tonight. We've got some reds here. We've got some purples here. Too Thin Coats is a great product. We're very fortunate to have all three waves on hand, all 90 colors to work with here on the tabletop. So that is our go-to. Of course, shout out to Game Envy. They provide us with our painting accessories. One of the prime painting accessories you're going to see used on stream, of course, the Exemplar Wet Palette. Has all kinds of fun little gadgets to it. And of course, these paint handles, which I would say have seen better days, but if you ask me, getting paint on them is a pretty good day. And then, of course, finally, Spray Gunner brings us all of our airbrush goods. If you need any kind of airbrush or airbrush accessories, definitely recommend you check out Spray Gunner. Of course, links to all of these guys are in the video description. Appreciate the support from the sponsors. Now, you can see this is the palette from that Gargant, one of probably 4 different sheets that were put in here. We're going to go ahead and refresh this while we get going. So yeah, Marvel Crisis Protocol. I've played one practice game. It was a lot of fun. Still a bit of a learning curve. Not as big as Warhammer 40K for sure, but there's still a lot of little nuance to it. The cool thing about Marvel Crisis Protocol is that I can paint every single model that's available for Marvel Crisis Protocol and still have less models to paint than the orc boys in my orc army. So nice refresher. Our goal tonight is to get this guy done This guy includes 3 different components. I've got him off of his cape. I've got his cape attached to the base. I kept these guys separate as the cape is going to be primarily purple. This is going to be reds and purples. So rather than having to fight to get around the back side of it, well, there you go. And my little hack right here, I just shoved a razor blade right into the back of him. Tighten up that focus there. Just jammed that right in there. The cape is going to cover that. That holds him in here nice and stiff so we can get the paint done. And then, of course, we've got a couple of little metallic bits that go along with him. So if all goes well, we'll get these done tonight's stream, and then, you know, we'll start looking at the rest of that Brotherhood affiliation pack to get added to it. I've got everything all primed up and ready, and we can go ahead and get ourselves moving. Let's go ahead and first of all saturate this wet palette. Yeah, quite a break on the number of models. That 12,000 models has gotten, or 12,000 points in models. I haven't done a model count, but if off the top of my head, I'd say it's probably in the range of somewhere around between 400 and 500 models. You know, of course, that's all inclusive. The big gargantuan Squiggoth and the giant Stampa, of course, they're included. The buggies, got all the buggies, you know, back when they were actually relevant for the game. A lot of fun with those. But yeah, that's been a huge project, years in the making. And let's be honest, I don't have years to put into another project. But I did notice with Cryface's videos, with the Wake and Make series, that we did have quite a few people that were also interested in Marvel Crisis Protocol. So not only am I, you know, kind of filling my own urges on checking out a game, I'm a big Marvel fan, but also, you know, if it's something that you guys do enjoy, well, let's do some more of them. So this channel, of course, is going to be a mix of all sorts of types of painting projects. You know, I just showed you the Sigmar model. We're going to paint some 40K. We're going to paint some Marvel Crisis Protocol. I've got terrain for all different types of games as well. So we're just going to do whatever kind of calls to us at any given time. What calls to me immediately is getting rid of this face here and bringing all of our focus onto this face here. So let's go ahead and get that kicked off. Of course, as always, if you're tuning in live with me, I'd love it if you absolutely popped in and said hello so I can see who's with me, but also so I can say hello back. So here's how we're going to get started today. We're going to be doing an airbrush of a good purple. All right, something that's really going to just be a good base coat for it. I did prime in black, and one step that I took here today is I did hold it under direct harsh lighting, and I did take a photo on my cell phone. That's going to be a good point of reference for where the light hits the model, so that way as I'm doing my blending, I can kind of pay attention to the contours and observe light in the scheme. Now, most of what I do is, I refer to it as a grim bright faux realism. I don't have any models in front of me to show you what I mean there. But we're going to lean more into an illustrative style for these big, punchy colors. You know, we're not going to do cel-shaded, right? The comic sort of paint job. We're going to try and go for some decent blends and do something up pretty nice. So I'm going to spend a lot more time tonight with a traditional brush than an airbrush, as I know that many of you folks at home that are on your painting journeys in various stages, many of you may not have an airbrush. So a lot of what you're going to see I'm doing, although I will airbrush this initial base coat, this could be brush coated just the same way, and you know, follow along. If you're working on something as well, be sure to shout out. And if you haven't jumped into Discord already, encourage you to do so. You know, Discord is a great opportunity for you to kind of be able to share the progress that you have on the different projects you're working on. I would love to see those things. So feel free to join me on the old interwebs. So this is a very dark purple. This is Vile, let's see, Von Evil purple. What's going on, William Payne? How are you? Great to see you again. So I want to just take a look at this on my palette. This is very, very close to black. And I'm just debating on whether or not this is what I will use for this initial base coat, or if I want to get something with a little more vibrancy. So we can see on the wet palette here, we're going to go ahead and thin it down a little bit just so you can get a better read on the color. Very, very dark. So I don't think I want to start that dark. I think that what I'll likely do is start with a step up in the purple range and then reinforce the shadows later. All right, so we are going to go with instead Enchantress Purple. That's what going to be our start here. It is a darker purple still, but with a bit more vibrancy to it. So let's just go ahead and get some of this in the airbrush. Now, one of the reasons I chose Magneto as this first paint job, I did assemble the entire affiliation pack. I did get all of them primed as well, ready to go. But I chose Magneto simply because, you know, he's one of my favorite. I grew up watching the original X-Men animated series. Yeah, it was one of those things I would race home from school, you know, fighting saber-toothed tigers and dysentery on the way. And, you know, every day I would be there in time to watch that show without fail. You know, as a kid, never had an opportunity to really dig too deep into comics. I got my hands on a couple of trades here and there. We were able to read like kind of almost the graphic novel compilations of stories from time to time. And Magneto was always one of those that just kind of resonated with me, right? He's a villain in a lot of cases, but some could make the argument as well that he's also just misunderstood. You know, he's got a really relevant message, but he might not always choose the right ways to go about achieving his goals. And I'm sure we can all relate with that at some point or another in life. And I like to think of him as a good guy that, like I said, a bit misunderstood. So always had a connection or an affection for him, I guess you could say. And of course, the X-Men in general has always been my favorite of comic properties. So as we go, you're going to see I've got the Brotherhood, I've got the X-Men affiliation pack, I've got the Domino and Cable add-on, and then I've got the Blob and Pyro add-on as well. So I figured that would be a great way to start. And we're going to just kind of stay true to some of those original colors, much like they did here on the data sheets or the hero cards, whatever they call them for this game. So we're going to be going in that general range, you know, the purples, the reds on the body, you know, and we're going to just kind of go from there. So let's go ahead and get at it. First of all, let's just check, make sure our paint is flowing as it should. We don't need much here. And we are going to utilize a bit of a zenithal idea, right? So some of our deepest regions may stay more black, but we're going to do everything in this purple, even the stuff that's going to go red. Reason being, of course, is that purple is a great transition color for red, and that's a big part of why, you know, the color theory works on his hero design based off of how they originally animated him or illustrated him. Doesn't take much. And again, you can do this with a brush. If you wanted to imitate a zenithal highlight with a brush and not an airbrush, well, that would just be closer to a slap chop vibe. Use the dry brush and just build up layers of the paint, but observing the direction the light is coming from. So if I was to dry brush, I would be starting at the head and moving downwards. Right? That would protect a lot of the undercarriage and recesses to go ahead and get those built up. All right, and we're going to focus on him and his attire, and then we're going to be doing all of the basing and metallic bits after the fact. So that gives me the freedom to just be a little wild with it. And if my airbrush or my traditional brush oversprays a bit more than it should and hits the surrounding areas, not a big deal. We already planned to paint those later. So it gives us just a little bit more wiggle room. I like to be messy and then clean up as I go. And so having that tactic in place for where to begin, you know, is very, very helpful towards that end goal. I won't have any hobby stuff to show for a few days with the reveal of the Space Wolf refreshed, swapped hard over to my Marines, and in build mode. Pretty excited about that Space Wolf refresh myself. I know Dan is as well, chomping at the bit. Now, Dan did future-proof a lot of his stuff, so his blood claws and whatnot are all done on Primaris bodies. So there's a good chance that if nothing else, those kits will be, an opportunity for head swaps for him, just to add a little bit of that new to it. But super excited about that. Super excited about the World Eaters as well. Got that codex coming. I did buy a World Eater army a couple of years back, something I was going to paint up for myself. Then we did book a commission at the studio for around 7,000 points of World Eaters. And after getting done with that commission, I just left our World Eaters on the shelf for a little while. I figured I had done my job with World Eaters and needed a break. That Chaos Marine trim can be very oppressive of a task to accomplish. So, that new codex, that new, what's he called, Slaughterbound, right? Kind of the apothecary, if you will, for the World Eaters, definitely has me very interested. I also have 2 boxes of the Emperor's Children that I need to get painted up for the studio. Now, fortunately, I think I only need to paint up 1 box and change. There's a lot of stuff in there that we're just not going to need all the extras of. So, but that's a project on the table as well. In what order will I get to them? Well, stay tuned and we'll see. Of course, we always do prioritize any kind of commission work, as there are lights that have to be kept on and, bills that have to be paid. So those will slow things down as we go, but being able to fill our spare time with personal projects is always nice. So with those base coats started, let's figure out, what do we want to do first? Do we want to focus on the purples of the cape, or do we want to focus on getting Magneto blocked in? I think the cape is probably going to be the move here. So we're just going to use this airbrush just to help encourage that paint to dry just a little bit quicker. Yeah, so my early career, we talk about 5th edition for 40K. 5th edition was a crazy time for me. I hadn't quite broken into the hobby side of it yet. Lots of models unpainted, multiple armies. I would jump around army to army, and by the time I even got the hankering to paint, we had so many models, it was ridiculous. I did finally give in, and I picked Space Wolves as my primary army at that time, and I did finally paint up, I'd say, about 80% of a Space Wolf army. And that was my first true love in 40K. Now, sometimes true loves wane and then new loves appear, and that's kind of how we end up with orcs. So if you want orcs, that's how you get orcs. Well, the Space Wolves do have a special place in my heart for that reason. So I'm definitely looking very forward to that book, although I will never woo like I used to. So, but I'll get to see a lot of those models, and maybe even be fortunate enough to paint up 1 or 2 for Dan when that time comes around. But, there's until I see a new melee detachment for orcs, I'm kind of just waiting on 11th edition. I get all of the things I love about tabletop wargaming. There's obviously the gameplay is a key part about tabletop wargaming, but the reality is, you can't tabletop wargame alone. Right? The best part about that hobby is the time you get to spend and the bonds you get to create with other people of similar interest. And that's basically what the Hobby Goblins is, right? So being able to take in 3 battle reports a week, I feel like I'm getting the best parts of 40K, even if I'm not rolling any dice at any point in time. And the problems that I have with 40K currently are personal things. They are not necessarily something indicative of the game as a whole, just kind of what the game is to me. So if that's something you've been considering looking into, I strongly encourage you check it out. 40K can be a very fun game, and it does have an absolutely incredible community. So definitely don't sleep on it. Definitely give her a go. So here what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with... that's our base coat. Our base coat, again, is going to get a little bit of extra shadow pumped into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that same purple that I apparently have put back on the shelf. Here we are. And then we're going to take some of our highlight purple, and we're going to use this to create midtones. So our highlight, we're going to be looking at spectral purple, again, 2 thin coats paint. And these two paints do blend fairly well. And then for a final highlight, we're probably going to use something in the realm of this cyber pink. All right, I'm going to be taking this, and I'm going to take probably something like this, this nice fluorescent pink to really ramp the vibrancy of it. You can kind of see this pink is made desaturating red with whites, so it does have a bit of a pastel vibe, and I want to pump the saturation up on that. I want to get something really vibrant out of it. So when that time comes for the highlights and whatnot, we'll go ahead and investigate what the proper paint combination is to use. But let's get in on this cape. So 2 thin coats does dry fairly matte. However, it still gives us plenty of information. There's plenty of shine here where I don't really need the photo I took on my phone yet. This is kind of showing me where those lights need to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the in-betweens right now. I see my darkest dark is that purple. I know where that lightest light is going to go. So what I'm doing here, mixing up enough of a mid-tone here that will allow me to start doing that value sketching here, breaking that in there and helping define where those lights need to be. As always, I want a fairly loose paint. We're not using anything special around here to loosen up our paint, just a little bit of water out of that jug. Depending on what part of the country you're in, I understand in the drier parts of the country, you might want to use some flow improvers, right? That might be something that really helps keep your paint from drying out on you. We are down here in the state of Florida where nothing is dry. It's all humidity. So I don't have to worry about using any extra sauces to keep that in line. Now, if I do have any MCP players with me, specifically ones that are playing Brotherhood, I could not figure out how exactly they wanted this attached on the back here. Rather frustrating, if I'm honest, as the picture of it was a side shot like this, and then there was an arrow pointing back to what I couldn't see. So I got it on there in roughly the same angle that they suggested, and well, that's just good enough for me. That being the case, though, I do need to be fairly cautious as I'm painting this model, not to break that off of there. You know, one of the things that I'll do to steady my hand is I will use the pinky finger on my brush hand. As you see, it'll find an anchor spot somewhere on the model, and that will allow me to pivot around the model where I need to, and it will help circumvent some of the shakiness that I might get from, you know, holding this brush here. So what we're doing here, this is going to be a slow process to start with, but I'm just going to try and find the places that purple really needs to show its folds, and we're just going to get some color baked in. Now, this is kind of splotchy as we're initially starting it here. Through our layers, we're going to improve that. We'll be going kind of back and forth up until a point that we've got everything right where we want it. And as we do so, the opacity will build, the coverage will improve, and the smoothness of the overall paint job will ultimately end up where we want it to be. Sometimes on smaller models, I might actually take and have my hand gripped like this, and then press my fingers against my hand. Right? This being a larger base model, you know, gives me plenty of stuff to work off of. You might see I have to turn to that every so often here or there. But really, whatever works for you and helps you be comfortable, because painting takes a while. It's not a very quick process unless you're knocking out like some quick slap chop or something of the sorts. It's very important to protect the comfort of what you're doing, so that way you don't fatigue yourself. As I mentioned, that frost giant I showed off at the top of the stream, Well, that did take 40 plus hours, right? Obviously not consecutive. I only go 40 hours straight if there's an event because I have no sense. But, you know, that was a lot of time staring into the recesses of the same model. So this mid-tone is going to cover probably somewhere in the ballpark of 70% on this initial pass. There are things that are going to be lost in shadow that when we come back with that initial color that we ran through the airbrush, we're going to go ahead and reinforce those shadows with a brush and blend, get a little bit better. Of course, this cloak is going to be behind the back of Magneto, so there's going to be a fair amount of shadow that exists on it as is. All right, so we don't want to go too deep on it. We are going to have the model obscuring a lot of the work that we would try to do otherwise. So really just enough to show off the contours. Got a little smooth jazz in the ear hole this evening, keeping me company while I rock out this stream for you. I should say with you, because ultimately this is for me. As nice as it is to have a painting handle, sometimes you gotta just take the miniature off of it. While looking for images for the thumbnail, I did see some people have done some absolutely incredible things with this model. Very inspirational. Whether I'll be able to hold a candle to them or not does not matter. Here in painting, the competitive aspect of painting is, you know, you competing with that last model that you did. And that Frost Giant, well, that Frost Giant's one of the best things I've ever produced. You know, so if I can outdo that, that's great, but not everything has to be a win condition, right? If I can get something that I'm happy with here in a reasonable amount of time, well, that's good enough for me. Especially being that this is a personal project, right? This is something for my own personal collection, something that I'm doing for a commission, or especially something like that Battle to End Alzheimer's that's for such a great cause. Well, that's always going to get a little bit more attention and affection from me. So this one, stakes are low. I can't mess it up. You know, I'm the only one that has to be pleased with it by the time it's done. And there's something really refreshing and rewarding about that. Did join a MCP page on Facebook today. One of the first things that I saw on there, my good buddy Izzy Sanchez posting up some photos that he had done of a recent commission, and a tiny baby Jesus. They are beautiful. They are beautiful. But that is why we're not competing with other folks. All right, we're setting goals. We're trying to accomplish those goals. Izzy is a wonderful painter. And if I held all of my stuff up against his stuff, that would only give me cause for disappointment, or maybe even, you know, maybe even sap motivation to do the thing. And doing the thing, well, that's how you get good at it. You don't get good at it from, you know, just some natural born talent, or from spending a ton of time looking at models online. You get good at a thing by doing a thing. What's going on, Joel? Great to see you again. How are you? Now, one of the hardest parts is waiting for the previous layers to dry, since we are using such a loose paint and it is so thin. I actually could probably thicken this up a little bit. But that does increase the dry time. And what we don't want to do is take paint that's in the process of drying and start moving it around. That'll be unwanted texture. And although texture is nice on a model paint job, intentional texture is what you want. Rarely is the accidental texture going to work out to be something that is a benefit, right? Not to say there aren't some happy accidents that you might, get into along the way. However, by and large, a good plan is typically what's going to yield results, not accidents. Of course, don't be afraid to make accidents. Sometimes that accident can be the sign that you need to pivot, and you can end up, kind of going off script. You can end up with something that you like. So where planning is good, I recommend planning about 70%, or, having the expectation that about 70% of your plan is going to deliver, right? If you do that, then when you do run into those times that you need to pivot, or that time that you have a cool idea, right? You've already accounted for it, and you've already provided yourself leeway to make those decisions. Yeah, check it out. Tell me what you think of it, Proto J. Proto J has been around with me since the beginning, so I think that you'll be able to see a fair amount of growth in that from some of my projects of old. Got some folks out at Adepticon this weekend. Hope everybody's out there is having a great time. Definitely curious to know what everybody thinks of that new venue, the very first time they're in that venue. So I do anticipate a couple of growing pains. But hopefully the event is going off gangbusters for them. Starting to get some volumes to the cape here. And you'll see I'm leaving some of the areas where the fold is more downward facing. I'm going to leave those in that darker color. Now when it moves around to more upward facing, we're going to curve it back in a little bit. So this side right here, we're going to just leave that in that darker color for now. We're going to try and spend most of our brush strokes in the same direction. That way, any little texture that lines up from that paint drying, which is always a possibility, it can be flowing in the same direction and give more of an intentional texture, give movement to the piece and flow. So now that we've got that broken in there for our base of the value sketch, now I want to start looking at where the light's hitting it the most. So this is going to be maybe about 30% of the model. Oh, looks like we got ourselves a hair. None of that. This is again going to be something that's going to take a couple of passes to really build up the opacity where we want it. So what we're doing here is just mainly trying to block in where we want this color to be. Once we're done here, we're going to be coming back with that darkest purple once again, and we're going to be retouching all of those darkest spots. So we don't have to be 100%. Once I put the paint down and I come back in to push the shadows, I might find that, hey, I need to actually paint over that thing I just painted this color. But we're just working in layers. Of course, areas right here, like the bottom of the cape, are going to get a little bit more attention than the tops, especially in that shadowed, that recessed area there. We've talked about it a couple of times. Do remember, when you're dealing with paint, especially a loose paint, that your brush is going to deposit more paint where you pick it up than where you put it down. So think about that as you're determining where your brush strokes are. Going down and up is basically the same thing as up and down in blending. You know, not necessarily in dry brushing, like we talked about at the top of the video. If you want to do a dry brush to create a zenithal effect, you know, then up and down up are diametrically opposed. But for something like this, we're just trying to control the direction and flow of the texture. So that means that as long as it's moving in the same direction, vertical or horizontal, depending on your direction, right? Then those things are going to work together very nicely. Think about material as well, right? A lot of superheroes, and Magneto is a great example of which, this is more like painting flesh tones than it is anything else. But rather than using traditional flesh tones, we're going to be using the colors that go on it. But the volumetrics of the musculature need to be observed, just like as if I was painting that gargant flesh that we saw. What we want to do is capture the shapes and highlight and enhance how, the volumetrics, the shape of the thing that people are going to be seeing. If we paint it all like one color, matte coated down, well, that shape can get lost pretty easily. Getting a little sloppy on some of this, but that's why we're doing the layers, and we're doing it in stages. I'm of the mindset that I know I'm not going to get it perfect on the first go. All right, I'm going to be willing to go a little bit further over the edges, knowing that layer after layer I can continually refine to get the shapes exactly where I want it. My body is ready for the next season of X-Men 97, though I'm certain it's going to be a little while before we get it. But how good was that show? As a fan of the cartoon from the 90s era, I approved, man. I approved. starting to get some good volumes in there. Appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, that rock was an experiment. We just kind of talked through our process and our thoughts as we were doing it, and it turned out better than I could have imagined, for sure. Definitely a technique that I'll be using again in the future for other projects. But yeah, I appreciate that, for sure. Yeah, but hopefully that Gargant will raise a fair bit of money in the raffle that they're doing. I can't brag on JC enough. JC Watts. That's his event. 4 years running. First year, 60 players. This year is grown to 170 players. Over the past 2 years, guys, they've raised $60,000 for that charity. How incredible is that? And so the hope is that, maybe we can help them beat that record this year. Yeah, I'm definitely very proud of how that turned out. And really, to get that stone, you guys can watch episode 7 in the Gargant series there where we do the mace. The stone was actually a super easy process to do. I used a series of techniques that are very low skill. They don't take a lot of know-how at all. They don't take a lot of really impressive tools at all either. It's just a series of quick stippling and layering, most of which done with a sponge. A little bit of glazing to unify it all once the sponging was done. But 100% something that anybody could do. It doesn't take a lifetime of brush control training. It doesn't take a lifetime of color theory. And that's typically the thing that I want to share with folks. If I can give somebody the confidence to try and do something like this themselves, and maybe arm them with a couple of techniques that can yield results to produce a product that they'll be proud of, I don't know that there's anything better I can get out of this hobby. In many ways, that's better than even my own personal accomplishments, throughout this journey as well. I like to say the world's a pretty destructive place, right? And although not everybody has an opportunity to be some sort of warrior for some sort of great cause, everybody can get out there and create something. And if we're creating something, that's kind of helping close the gap, right? That's kind of helping create a balance, right? And that's something that we discuss a lot, right? 40K is a very important community to us. And the reason that we run our battle ports the way that we run our battle reports is because that community needs protection, right? It needs people that are going to help build it and lift it up and be able to help improve someone's experience. And it's the same with art. In all of my time painting competitively or judging competitive paint, that's the one thing I found, was that community flourished under, feedback and, collaboration. Most people that are going out there to paint aren't going out there to be the best painter. They're going out there to share their work, their blood, sweat, and tears, their countless hours of time invested. They're going to share that with everybody. And if they can improve along the way, that's obviously a benefit. But sometimes just having somebody take a look at it and go, wow, that's cool. Sometimes that's enough. So one of the things that we're going to be doing around here, we're getting our feet wet with the channel here, really kind of finding our identity online, if you will. But one of the things that we would like to return to form from the Hobby Pants when it was originally on the Gobros channel is doing artist feedback. Allowing people to jump in the Discord, over into the Hobby Projects feedback channel, drop a piece that they might want, somebody else's opinions on. I find personally, if I've spent 20 or 30 hours on a project, I'm not seeing the same project that you're seeing. I'm seeing all the flaws, I'm seeing all the errors. I'm seeing all the bad decisions. So sometimes getting a fresh set of eyes on it, helps me see what my audience is seeing. Thing to remember too is that feedback, isn't always something you have to listen to. There's a bunch of stuff that I do throughout my process of painting that other people might look at and be like, hey, you're doing that wrong. Right? But that's where style comes into place. And I talked about judging paint. Judging paint is tough, simply because it can be a very subjective sort of thing to be looking at. And most important is to identify, like, what is a person trying to accomplish, right? What is their intended style? Is it something I can recognize, like an MMM, like a grimdark? Or is it something that they're kind of working on their own? Like I talked about, mine is a mix of faux realism, grimdark, and vibrant colors. That's why I refer to it as a grimbright. Right? And if somebody was to look at that next to, I don't know, some of the Golden Demon presentations that are out there, and say, hey, this is all wrong. But the question is, does it look cool? Because that's what we're going for, right? I want it to look cool. And if it could do that, there's not a whole lot more it needs to do. So now this pass is just building up opacity across it. A lot of times paints that are desaturated with a white, they can be a little more challenging to get your full opacity where you want it to be at. the way in. Looks like it. Yes, we are. Let's get our opacity built up a little bit more on the inside here. And then we're going to go ahead and get started with our next layer to start blending some of these colors together. Some of these larger dark areas, what we're also going to do is going to just go ahead and drop a couple of like effectively edge highlights in there just to help define the shape. A lot of them are going to be defeated once we start going back in with that darker purple. But we're likely going to finish with an edge highlight around things like the base of the cape right down here at the bottom, the very bottom of it. And so we can go ahead and set that up for those brighter edge highlights, but just making sure that a little bit of light is hitting it while we're here. You guys watching at home, I'm curious, what are, or who is, your favorite comic book character? Doesn't have to be Marvel. Could be DC, could be Image, could be Dark Horse, could be Archie. I mentioned Magneto is my favorite Marvel. Of course, I had a big affinity for Batman growing up as well. You know, I grew up with the Michael Keaton Batman era. I was 9 years old when that movie came out, 89. And that set me on a path to be a Batman fan forever. You know, but here in my adult years, you know, less comic books, more movies. And, well, the Marvel movies have just killed the DC movies at every turn. They've just been better at every turn. So as a whole, through the years, thanks to the MCU, I've become a bigger Marvel fan than any other, you know, comic book company. But I still love Batman. Yeah, Jay, I know for a while, Deadpool was your favorite. No, Superman's a cool character, right? Super, super powerful. You know, but his weakness is understanding the human condition. You know, something that he has a really hard time relating to, even though he lives in it. You know, and that's where, like, that Superman film, that Zack Snyder Superman film, Wasn't a big fan of it because Superman was just like this kind of dark, brooding sort of fella. And he wears his underwear on the outside of his pants. So really, he needs to have a little whimsy to him. Okay, got the purples going in there pretty good. So we're going to be coming back to that mix. We're going to be mixing a little bit more. And what we're going to do is start dropping this in between the darkest points and this pure cyber pink that we've been using. Huh. Actually, I should have been going spectral purple, but that's okay. That cyber pink actually does well. That just gives me more room to do my shadows underneath. So we're looking here for something that's not quite a glaze consistency, but also is not opaque. And we're going to go ahead and just start dropping this down into these recesses right alongside where that darkest bit is. We want this to overlap a bit of that pink that we put down already as well. One of the things about the airbrush is the efficiency. Right, with an airbrush, I probably could have had this with a fair bit of gradient to it already done. So something about the speed is very nice. However, if we don't have to go fast, then it becomes a decision. And like that's in painting 40K, I really don't have any option. You know, I kind of have to go fast. There's too much to do. Like we talked about, I've got 3 models, but 2 of them are really just some metallic stuff that is going to go really quickly anyway. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab some more of the purple here, get it a little bit darker, and then we're going to start working into further into the recesses. And this still has a mix of that pink in it. So these areas that I left unpainted for a shadow, we're going to go ahead and get them covered in this color now. And that's going to help it all begin to look more like one material rather than big holidays and stuff that hasn't been painted yet. We're going to try and keep this off of all of those raised surfaces that are going to be dragging or catching the most light. So where this cloak kind of flows upwards, for example, right here at this end, that's going to be catching a fair bit more light So we want to keep some of that pink intact there. And we're basically going to just be doing this kind of back and forth until we get the blends where we want them. Okay, that looks pretty good there. Oh, don't need any more of that. I got plenty of that on the tray. General Zod was misunderstood as well. I agree with you. One of the unique differences between the two of them, though, is that Magneto's just a man, right? He's just a dude. Now he happens to have other powers, but he's had a lot of life experiences that are the worst experiences that a man could have. You know, where General Zod, you know, he comes from a different planet entirely, you know, from a culture of like conquerors, right? So he doesn't, you know, he sees everybody as less than him. And although there are times in the comic where Magneto definitely was, you know, saw non-mutants as being less than mutants, a lot of that was prompted by how he was treated for, you know, being different. But I definitely could see that misunderstood for sure. But in general, people left to their own devices can do some pretty shitty stuff. And that's kind of why what Magneto's thought was, you know, why am I going to let you mistreat me and my people if we are more powerful than you? Right? If power is the language you understand, then we are superior beings because we're more powerful than you. Right? And I don't think that he really had an inherent need to conquer the world, right? Or to be the most powerful. But when you're a victim, you know, you're going to view the world differently. I don't know if Zod was ever a victim. Or maybe he was. Tell me what you guys think. Now the back of this cape is going to get a lot more visual attention than the inside of it. As I said, the inside of it is going to be competing with tension with Magneto floating right there in front of it. So it is more important that this back really gets the touch to it that you know, can make it kind of stand on its own. So we're going to be shooting for some creamier blends back there. Some higher contrast potentially. And then rather than doing brush glazing, we are going to apply our filter with our airbrush to really push the shadows in and to kind of unify some of these kind of chunky blends that we're doing. All right, let that relax for just a moment. What's going on, Luke Sheffield? Great to see you, my friend. Now, you had it right the first time. Every womb. Every wombe. I like that. I like that. I question him eradicating Earth during the process. Yeah, that might be going a little bit far, right? It might be. He should have said, Superman, I need a blood sample real quick, and we're going to find another planet to rebuild Krypton. Have fun with your human peeps. Yeah, I don't know. Like, how many habitable planets out there would have been there for him? That's a question for you for sure. But jumping right to, all right, this planet is ours, so we'll just kill everybody. Yeah, that's a little extreme. Yeah, that's a great point. In the eyes of the Kryptonians that he was fighting for, he did very much have that, like, save his people sort of thing. But the difference between Magneto and Zod is that the people he was looking to eradicate were not oppressing his people, right? His people had long since passed, and they needed a new home, and he was willing to do anything to get it, even in the face of really no real opposition. I mean, had he come down to Earth and just been like, yo, this is what we need, and everybody on Earth was like, yeah, suck it, get out of here, we're not going to let you have it, well, then that might be a different scenario, right? But he just came here ready to be like, all right, I'm taking it, and I'll kill anybody who stands in my way. Calm down a bit, let's talk. What's going on, Shoelace? You got Marvel Unlimited, have been binging X-Men comics. How is that service, man? How do you feel about reading comics, I imagine, on a tablet? Is it still pretty good, I assume? I definitely find that I like more obscure comics a little bit better. right? Like I just had Mark Perry. Some of you guys know him from 40K. Others might not know the guy. I just had him read I Am Legend in graphic novel form. That's a fantastic, fantastic book. You know, the movie that Will Smith movie that, you know, was inspired by it, but definitely not based on it. Now we're just going to pull those shadows out just a little bit more. Just a little bit more purple in the mix this time. I want some of these creases to be basically a hard line of that brightest color right next to the darkest color. That's what's really going to help us sell the shadows and sell the contours on the cape. How'd that gambit come out, Shoelace? We did a lot of the same stuff on the gambit that we're trying to accomplish here as well. All right, go back to a slightly lighter color. Still in our very loose glaze consistency here. Now, if I was doing a traditional glazing, I would pull a little bit more paint off of the brush to do what I'm doing here. But there's a kind of a little mix of wet blending going on at the same time in certain parts. So as long as I can control the paint and make sure it doesn't deposit in little drips where I pick my brush up, then that'll be fun. Some of these Marvel models for MCP here are set up very well for that cell shaded, that comic style of paint job. Maybe at some point I will do a faction up specifically to do that cell shaded. It's a pretty cool style. I see people do it in 40K, and that's just too much work for a 40K army. Whenever I sit down to paint, I always find myself playing Battlegrounds. I'm having the exact opposite kind of scenario nowadays. Every time I sit down to think, all right, I got 2 hours for bed, let me unwind with some Battlegrounds, I find myself video editing or creating assets for the stream or, you know, any number of other things other than just enjoying a little video game time. But that's what happens, you know, when you got 6 streams a week between the 2 channels. You know, I get to play Battlegrounds with my friends when I do so, right? But that's not always the case. And although much of the video editing I'm doing is by myself, it's not directly with my friends. It's for something that we're all working on together. And so I know it's ultimately going to culminate with us being here in the studio. And there's been something very rewarding about that process and the bonding getting to know everybody better, getting to, embark on a task that when I first said, hey, YouTube sounds cool, it was so hard. Right? I had such a lack of knowledge on video production in general. And so now having the group of guys that we've been able to work together and start creating that, start unraveling the mysteries of video production. Well, now it's become something that I just, it is a passion for me, even though it is hard work. We just put that Tau Tactics video up for our members. You're going to see it right there now. For the non-members, that's going to be available on Saturday afternoon. Took about 12 hours to make a just under 8-minute video. And the average time is about an hour a minute. So once I'm much more competent with it, well, it only will have taken me 8 hours. But you got to do the thing to get good at the thing. And I find when I sit down to plug into a video game, I can only get so good at that video game. And I've found the older I get, the more, the taking on, learning new skills, learning new things has got just a lot more value than it ever did when I was younger. I gave up probably 10 years of my life to something like World of Warcraft, right? And nowadays I just have a really hard time doing it. So it's typically, if I'm going to play Battlegrounds, typically it's very, very late at night. Okay, that's moving in a direction I do like. And although the blends are not perfect, they are working out okay. So we're going to take a smaller brush and we're going to really focus in on that base purple color. Really punch the shadows up a little bit more. Now another cool way to do this would have been to have based it in a darker blue. Right, that would have allowed us a bit more control with our temperature contrast. Something that, animated cartoons in the 90s just didn't do a whole lot of. Right, but being able to go to like nice, cool recesses up into very warm, vibrant surface area, something that tends to work very well. So just carefully getting in here and lining those deepest recesses with this paint here. And it's loose enough it'll go where I want it. And it's not full opacity. And we're just going to be doing small lines as well to give us a little bit of texture read in the bottom of it, so it's not just flat surfaces. I'm using quite a small brush right here. The downside of the small brush, of course, is small brush means small body. Small body means we're not holding a lot of paint. So I'm having to go back into my paint quite frequently to get done what I need to get done here. Also makes it a lot harder to keep the paint out of the ferrule. So you can kind of see down in here, see the little bit of line work, adding that little bit of texture in there now. We saw a fair amount of that in that giant as well. Texture, after all, is the commonly forgotten contrast. Can anybody in chat name me all of the key points of contrast that you can apply in miniature painting? If you've watched enough of my stuff so far, you've probably got a pretty good idea, because I tend to not shut up about those things. So call this a test. I'm going to fail. All right, now let's get some more of this pink out. And we're going to mix some of that cyber pink. We're going to mix it down with this spectral purple. We're going to drop this on here just at those points that we want to make sure are top facing. And let's do some like little back and forth, little crissy, crossy, more textural elements to it. That's going to help us blend it down into it in the places that it needs that blending. So we talked about earlier how we were trying to go all either up and down or down and up. Now we're going to go against that, going in vertical motions, or horizontal rather than vertical. And the only place we really need to get high opacity on this color are the most upward facing parts. So little bits of stippling works as well. Big thing is you still kind of have a sharp point on your brush. If you have a bunch of little applications that somebody can take a look at it and see the shape of the brush that you're using, again, we talked about it in the past as well. What we're doing is lying with the paint job, and I want you to believe something that's not real. And every little piece of evidence to the contrary, like an obvious brush stroke. Well, that obvious brush stroke tells us without a doubt that thing was painted. Get a slightly darker variant. We want to do a darker variant down in here, but the same general idea. Give ourselves a little bit of texture there. And this is a good way to kind of do some blending without having to worry too hard about the glazing and going too slow to build up the glazing where you want it. Because now I can just grab these spots that I know I want highlights on and just kind of start chunking them in there. Inside too. You can kind of see how sporadically I'm moving my brush around. So not quite stippling, because it's not just a series of like little dots, but the same general purpose of it. We also, if this is too clean, look like Magneto never gets his hands dirty. So a little bit of wear is actually pretty good. Now we're going to be dealing with a different material once we get onto his outfit. So that's why I'm not doing the outfit at the same time as the cape here. If we did them both exactly the same way and they look like the same material, boring. So we want to really demonstrate on the armor that is more of that latex vibe that is more appropriate for superhero armor. But this is just a piece of cloth right here. Give it some texture, give it some life. I don't know how well can you guys see that texture building up on there. And ideally, when you're doing your texture like this, you want to make sure that the color you're stippling is just a little bit lighter than what you're stippling over. Use this to kind of feather that line a little bit. Okay, so as we progress on here, you see it's becoming more and more pink. And that's where we're going to really turn to our filter layer here in just a moment to really return the vibrancy of purple to it. But I'm pretty happy with a lot of the texture building up. One more pass at these shadows with something very, very diluted. Adding further texture. This stuff is so thin, it's going to be nigh invisible once it's dried, but it'll add just enough for us. Okay, I'm liking where that's at. Now, typically I might do this next step in a situation where, I've got the whole thing together and I can start adding it. And I might even do it a second time after the fact. Right, but we're going to go ahead and drop that filter on here so we can kind of see where the cloak is and how we feel about it. So, back to the best paint in the Citadel range, Leviathan Purple. Have a good night, Jake. Great to see you, brother. Appreciate you stopping by. Just the teeniest drop. Big body brush. Say two dips. Let's see where our transparency is on it. That's pretty good. So barely enough in there to fill the cup. Bring our pressure down a little bit. Now we're going to come up in here and really ramp that purple saturation back up, especially into these shadowed areas. Now this is going to help us with the blend as well. And if you don't have an airbrush, you can do this just with glazing, right? That's basically all we're doing here. Glazing is using filters to get your paint to where you want it to be. Same general vibe. Only takes the littlest amount. But it does take an amount, and apparently that's empty. Shoelace, thanks for coming by, man. Always good to see you. Make sure we're spraying without a spatter. Because I want to hit this with the shadow, we're going to hold it primarily upside down. This gets us back into the purple family too. Eschews a fair amount of that pink. I don't know, pretty happy with it, guys. Pretty happy with it. Let's move on to Magento's body. I was misspelled it last night when I did the thumbnail on the first go. And I was like, well, that's his primary color. I wonder if there's any kind of correlation between magenta and him being named Magneto. Well, I wonder how much useful nuggets I might have shared while I was muted. We'll never know. Just so we can see how the colors are going to vibe. The little bits of purple in the recesses are very nice. We don't want to overdo it. These biggest muscle groups, I want to bring it up to full opacity. Again, on the surface, not in every recess. Going through a bit more of the red than I had on the palette. And then once I get done with this red, we're going to do our stand up and stretch. Again, a very, very important part about the hobby. Talked about fatigue. Look at it from a distance, let my eyes rest for a moment. Also stretch out the back. You know, kind of find yourself hunching over a little bit to get the angles that you need to paint. Something like that cape too, that's like long and flowing and a bunch of smooth surfaces, can be its own challenge to get your colors on and get blended out like you might like them. So one of the benefits of something small like Magneto here is the fact that the details are all so well placed that even if I don't do a high-speed paint job, I just do a fairly clean application. He takes paint very well, and you know, we also don't have to create what does Magneto look like. You know, people are going to recognize him, and a lot of that lie that we talked about is that recognition. In 40K, I would tell you, throw away your box art, do something clever, do something unique and original, especially if you're going to be getting judged on the work. That way you can leave a lasting impression, right? However, something like these MCP models, well, we want somebody to see it and be like, yo, that's that Magneto that I love, right? So that's our goal anyway. And the entire model needs this red, but our highlight reds are going to be working into descendingly smaller and smaller areas. I think once we get to that stage, I think that'll move pretty fast. The goal is tonight to get this model completely finished. You know, even if we don't get to those two little side pieces, that's okay. Not a ton of detail on them. Most of it's just metally bits. But maybe we'll knock some of that out, at least partially. Maybe I'll do all the metallics together. Now the helmet will probably need touch-ups because we are going to have to paint that face, and that is recessed in there pretty well. So we're just going to get a base of red on it. Then we're probably going to go ahead in there and get that done so it's out of the way so that we don't mess it up. Mess up the helmet when we're trying to get that face painted. And that is a tiny little face. Man, these models really take me back to my HeroClix days. My first competitive tabletop war game. All right, gloves are purple. Okay, we're going to let that dry in. I'm going to go ahead and start dropping in the stuff for the face, and then we're going to be coming back, highlighting these reds, and moving on to the purples. In the meantime, Stretch break. So the cape, from a distance, has really nice volumetrics to it. Obviously, there's not enough done on Magneto yet, on the body, to really see where he's at with it. I might come back with a bit more Leviathan into the cape, bring it closer to purple. There's still a lot more pink than purple at this point, especially underneath. At least get that underneath nice and rich with those purple pigments. Definitely looking forward to filling out this range, starting with these boxes that I have, of course, that X-Men Brotherhood affiliation packs. But there's a lot of really great models in this range. Cosmic Ghost Rider looks kind of silly in plastic, but once you get some paint on him, he's very, very cool. The Xavier and Shadow King pack are one I'm really looking forward to getting into. That Shadow King is something special. All right, so let's get a good flesh color to start with. Something like this. Glistening Gums. Now I know you're probably thinking, Glistening Gums, that's very pink. He doesn't have a pink face. But this is our undertones for the face. This is going to allow us to paint the entire face this color and then start adding our shading or our highlights with more traditional flesh tones. So we just want to get in there full coverage. And again, it's okay when this gets on the helmet. It's going to. It's unavoidable. That's why we haven't started any blending yet. All right, and then of course details on the face are going to require my try-hard focals. Yeah, it's too small. See all the gray in my beard here? But even as a young man, I don't know that my eyes were good enough to avoid something like this. I've got a 00 here, but I don't think I need to be quite that small. That was that brush you saw me working with the first time. So let's move to a 1. Now out of the factory, there's a product they put on these bristles to stiffen them. Make sure you hydrate your brush. And that's not just with new brushes. That's with all brushes. Let's just get in here and make sure that we do have full coverage. And though I refuse to paint box art in 40K, it is kind of refreshing having a paint guide right here for me. Let's move it over. Let's focus it in a little bit. Now these details are very, very fine, so I want to be very careful not to clog up any of those details with paint that's too thick. But we do need to make sure that we get a nice opaque coverage. So what I'm doing is taking an overly hydrated brush now, running around the eyeballs to make sure the paint that is there, make sure that it does move into all of those recesses. Take just a minute for that to dry down. While it does, let's bring a little bit more of this purple into this cape here. Get that focus back. There we go. Now those highest peaks on the cape can be a lot more pink than the rest of it. What's going on, Ms. Natalie? How are you? Okay, if we need to go any further with it, we'll be doing that when we add our shading to the Magneto body. But yeah, I think that that's pretty good. It's obviously a very nice purple cloak. It's got the nice pink highlights, but then it's also got a really nice texture establishing on it. Very nice, Ms. Natalie. Well, make sure you drive safe. I do really enjoy that texture. I do wonder where everybody is at tonight. All right, so let's go ahead and grab out the flesh tones that we want to accompany. This is Too Thin Coat's Pale Skin. And then we're going to take this Ivory Tusk, which is basically a cream color, and let that be that top highlight color. Now I will tell you, one of the things that I need the most improvement on in my painting are the tiny details of things like faces. Spin the brush to get as sharp of a point as possible. Start with the brow and the cheekbones. It'll be okay to leave some of that glistening gums behind it. This part looks really messy to start with, but that's because it is really messy. Let's see about cleaning the lens on these two, that might help. There we go. Now, brush size this small, even in Florida, that paint is going to dry on the bristles pretty quickly. You want to pay attention to the little tip of your brush for sure, and make sure that you don't have a little tiny ball forming on the end of that brush. Otherwise, your ability to paint any kind of details is going to fade pretty quickly. All right, we went a little bit strong and covered up the eyes on him right there, so we're going to have to come back and address that. Do the same thing we did earlier though. A nice saturated brush. Go ahead and thin out the paint that's in those recesses. A lot of it we can pick back up to find the shape again. Thin down some of this glistening gums. I'm going to put this right alongside the helmet to add some shadows back into the face. Thin even further. I'm taking just a little bit of that those glistening gums. a little bit of the flesh tone, a little of the vampire fang, because we do want to warm up the flesh just a little bit. But apparently we need to let that dry a little bit as well. While it's still wet, we can do a little wet blending in here. I noticed it on Captain America, and now I see it again on Magneto. All of these guys got some pouty lips. What's going on, Stephen Strait? How are you, brother? Yeah, had to start with Magneto. Had to. Haha! Welcome back, audio volume. I turned it off to do that blow drying, to dry this face off, and I need an adult. You guys make it to the content planning meeting for Cave Reps? We got some good stuff lined up for this week. Come on, find the focus. Maybe it won't focus in that close. What's up with that, Steve? Yeah. The eyes are so small, I can't even get the camera to focus on it. But you have to trust me, they actually turned out pretty good. Didn't turn out too bad at all. There's a minimal distance. Okay. That's not bad, huh? Man, this chill hop station I'm listening to, sometimes it gets awful steamy, man. Yep. Tried to fix it. Made him cross-eyed. Take a little white on the other side. Try to rein it back in a little bit. That is not bad. Now I'm putting this glistening gum back underneath the eyes and above the eyes to reinstall the shadow. And then we can take that flesh tone to highlight. want to leave just a little bit of that glistening gums between the highlight and the eyeball. Not bad. Definitely good enough for government work. Got to clean up a lot of the helmet around there. Yeah, I like the MCP sculpts as well, man. I was just commenting on that a bit earlier. You know, there's a lot you could do with them, but they're also not just riddled with detail. You know, 40K, you get like, your belt pouches have like trinkets on them. So now we're going to take this Vibrant, just hit the top of these muscle groups. Really punch the vibrancy up. How are we looking here? How's that focus? Now you could go for colors that are a little bit closer together, or kind of do the blending thing that I was doing with the purple here. But I just happen to have the color mixing, I should say. These three reds represent a really good range of color. Nice options for vibrancy shifts. And since we're not trying to make this a showcase piece, we're just trying to get something done that we're happy with, that looks good. We're, you know, ruling efficiency more important than anything else. And if we can avoid color mixing, we can just find the colors that we like, it becomes much more efficient. And that is a nice vibrant red getting laid down here. And this is just our mid-tone. We haven't even put our highlight red on here yet. And we want to leave some of that first shade of red too. So we're not painting everything that we painted with that darker red. We're just painting the top stuff. So like these biceps, for example, we're going to paint the top of that muscle, but we're going to be leaving the bottom side of the bicep. Still going to kind of follow its shape. Liking the way that's coming together. Let's come back and rebase coat this helmet. And I might even drop a little flesh wash on the recesses of the inside of that helmet, on his face right there. Just add a little bit more shadow. Face doesn't look bad, but it's all kind of a one note sort of thing. And I feel like if we can get those shadows pronounced in there, it'll be very good for it. Hey Steve, what color is the trim on Magneto's helmet? Yeah, I think we might do a little Magos right there down the middle. That red is looking pretty crispy. Let's take time to stretch, let that dry. Do a little reference here, find out what color that trim work is. Because it looks like silver in a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing. Yep, and he's got little silver appendages as well on his little collar. So yeah, Steve, we should get together and paint some up, man. I know you've got some MCP stuff to get painted too. I definitely have enough light at this desk here. We should do a little paint and hang, man. Holy cow, is this red vibrant. That is punchy in the mouth red right there. The helmet's kind of interesting in the fact that it is a sphere on top and a cylinder on the sides. So we're going to throw a couple of vertical lines of the highest highlights down right in by the face mask and about a third to 2/3 of the way around. And I was considering coming in with some orange to add highlights, but this is so vibrant, I really don't think I need to. All right, round highlight on top. Okay, so we do need to come back to our second red here and drop just a touch inside of the purple right here. The downside is there's really not as much purple showing on his helmet as there is in the rest of his body. So we're just going to take some of this darker red and make those highlights sharper by separating them with a slightly darker color. That looks pretty good. And this is just that thinned out purple we started with here, just to darken down those sides a little bit, and then we'll blend that out. Okay, let's do something about that face. We're going to take some of this Magos purple. Well, I can dig that. So let's go ahead and get our purples back where they need to be then, and we can get it to line up with this cloak better. So back to our base coats, just kind of quick and dirty here, more so to correct any issues that we've run into. Side of my brush just to get these things purpled out. Okay. So let's refresh our purples. Same thing we did on the cape here. But with the cape we used a lot of texture. We're not going to be using as much texture here. Thin paint, so again, like on the cape, we're just going to build it up layer by layer. We don't want to go too thick on here and have it obscure any of the details. Try to get it to a point where we can all see it together. Okay, let's add a little bit more pink in here. Soften it up again. All in all, this is going pretty quick. Typically, I'll limit these streams to about 3 hours or so, but I'd really like to get him done. I'm excited to see where he's going. Hello, Gavros. Well, hello, Wraith Mace. How are you, my friend? Good to see you as always. Just painting up a little Marvel Crisis Protocol tonight. One of my favorite heroes in Marvel right here, Magneto, who is entirely too hard for me to play on Marvel Rivals. At least that's what I thought. Actually, it turned out that Marvel Rivals itself was just too hard for me to play. Just reinforcing the shadows on some of these purples. Kind of help us smooth some of these transitions too. We're going for kind of chunky transitions. Some of these are just too small to even look at like edge highlighting too, you know. They're just so shallow. There might be a couple of spots I can drop some edge highlights, but what I think I'm going to do is push on with the model and see where edge highlights might be required. So let's go ahead and pull this knife out of his back. Let's go ahead and slide him onto this here cape. Dare say he's looking pretty good. Nice dynamic purples in there. But I do believe we need to add a bit of shadowing to him. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect him to the model and feel good about it. Stand it up and stretch. I am running late tonight, but I have nothing better to do. So we're going to finish this damn Magneto. I'm not going to let this be a 2-session banger. No, sir. Not today, Satan. All right, let's get our filter ready with the purple. We only need a little bit, so we're not going to use a cup. We're just going to take a big fat brush like we do. Get a good amount on here. Drop that in the airbrush. 2 brushes of the water. Maybe 3. Let's see, are we spraying all right? We are. Okay, so we want to come at him from underneath. Maybe I can put that knife back in his back. And we don't need much. Just enough. Okay, let him dry down. Let's go ahead and move on to this base. There's a lot of stuff going on in this base, but most of it is going to be pretty easy just to get some coverage on. Let's turn to the greatest metallics. This is a very bright metallic, but we're going to dirty it all down, so that'll be fine. I don't want this on my wet palette though. So we're going to grab ourselves a little mixing cup. Or even better, a little dry palette. Then we're just going to start working all this silver out. Now here, I'm not really worried about full coverage at all because of the extra layers we're going to put on it. I do want to make sure there's not a bunch of black peeking through. But other than that, and like I've mentioned in previous videos, this metallic is awesome, but it's also very loose on its own. So be careful that your brush isn't too wet or it'll go everywhere. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. My brush was too wet. It just means I need to be a little bit more careful. And that's probably because I didn't shake it very well either. Shake your paints, folks. Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. Can we get this back on this handle? Probably not. But let's try. Don't want to push down from the cape for two reasons. I don't want to rub any paint off, and I also don't want to break it off of where it's glued. That's way better coverage. A little shake is all you need. We did get a little on the cape around back. I'll just snatch it away from somebody before they can turn it around and look at the back, and then we'll be fine. You can look, but I've got to hold it. Who's played that game before? All right, I'm just going to go slow across this part here. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to avoid. Perfect. A loose paint can splatter if the brush movements are too aggressive. Nice and slow. No more splatters, please. Got some rebar here. I do believe that those stoplights are like, the casing where I'm at is yellow. Got an orangey yellow. I'm going to go ahead and paint it a silver, which is just going to give me a lighter base. And then we can work our metallics up over top of that way, or our yellows up over top of that, way easier than if it were black. And the silver can also help me get the lenses looking like glass by just filtering the color that goes over top of them. Just find all the metallic bits. We're going to differentiate them as we go, so it's not all just the same, but we can at least base them out in a completely unified way. And again, we're just going to go messy, so a lot of the ground cover here is getting silvered on it, but we're going to be able to paint over top of that. And although I'm going to finish this up tonight, I see I've got one person watching right now. We're probably going to go ahead and close out the stream if that hits 0. And I will go ahead and wrap this up, share updates on the Discord server. But as long as you're hanging with me, I'm hanging with you. Okay, cool. He should be dry. Let's get just a little touch of super glue. Because I don't want the super glue to go everywhere, we're going to put this little joker on here, little nozzle. Carefully slide that in there. Boom. See where I got a little splatter with that silver? Yep, sad face. But again, this is my project, personal project for me. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Last things that need to get silvered. Just put on these old man goggles here. Throw some silver on this buckle. Got to silver all the little nubs right here. Really awkward model to hold on to when it's fully assembled like this. Yep, I know we're off screen right now, guys, but I got to get this really close to my face. Oh. Yeah, not too shabby, not too shabby. Could have been a little bit cleaner on it, but that's just wasn't the destiny today. So let's get something going for the stonework. All the ground cover. Do something that's a nice brown that we can lighten up as we go. Something like this druid flesh is pretty nice. And we're just going to fill in all of the ground cover. Through a series of washes and stippling and sponges, we'll get it where we want it to be. Looks like we got a little steel trap door right here. And this can go on here nice and thick. But do make sure it can go inside of those cracks. It's weird not having as prominent of a base rim on these. Okay, got that stuff based in. Nice and quick and dirty. I'll be coming back to paint the base rim black, as one should. But in the meantime, I want to get all of the brown baked in where it needs to be baked in. All right, that's base coats. Almost 11 o'clock. I still have a bit of work to do, but I need to get out from underneath these lights for a bit before I get back to work on it. So there you have it. There is our one-off Magneto here this evening. I'll go ahead and get him finished up, get him posted onto the Discord. Let's dial him in a little bit. A couple of things I need to do. The silver is too bright on him. I need to dull that down with some of that same purple that we were using. I definitely like that purple and that red working in tandem. I'll probably get in here and fix those couple little spots where that silver got away from me onto the cloak. But by and large, you know, fairly quick, fairly easy Magneto scheme. So thank you guys for tuning in. Definitely hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to be back here Monday for Wake and Make. What we're painting up, I do not know. I will let you guys know in the Discord on that as well. And of course, you can, you know, look out for a thumbnail that'll kind of give you some insight. It might be some MCP. Cryface might be working on an old project that he's got to get finished. I don't know yet. So until then, you know, I'm gonna be in the dark right alongside you guys. Great to see everybody, and we will see you again here real soon. Till next time, you know, keep your pants on.